It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. Of course, we begin at home, as in a push to boost public savings and finance sustainable growth, President Bola Tinubu has ordered his economic management team to urgently review all government deductions and revenue retention practices. Tinubu warned that public investment remains at a low 5% of GDP due to weak savings and called for more efficient spending and a review of deductions from the Federation account, including charges by revenue agencies and fees under the Petroleum Industry Act. He stressed that every naira must be optimized to keep Nigeria on track toward its goal of becoming a $1 trillion economy by 2030, with a growth target of 7% by 2027.
They emphasized that it is a moral imperative because this is the only sustainable path to leading millions of Nigerians out of poverty. In terms of the issue of the directive, yes, the economic management team has a directive, and it speaks also obviously to the question of the chairman. They have a directive to look at these charges, these fees, these deductions, and to see what efficiencies can be achieved, what savings can be achieved. Because, as I had mentioned, the figure, the percentage of savings needs to be increased.
Now, President Bola Tinubu yesterday sounded the alarm that the lingering troubles of the Ajaokuta steel company had gone beyond an economic setback and had morphed into a dangerous sovereignty risk. Once touted as Nigeria's industrial crown jewel, its decades-long paralysis now casts a shadow over the nation's economic security and strategic independence, the president stated. President Tinubu, in his keynote address at the inaugural Stakeholders Summit on the development of the steel sector in Nigeria that took place in Abuja, argued that the sector holds the key to unlocking the full measure of Nigeria's industrial promise. President Tinubu, who was represented by the Vice President Kashim Shettima, stressed that his administration is changing the narrative. The President Tinubu outlined ongoing efforts by his administration to revamp legacy projects in the sector, such as the Ajaokuta Steel Company, the Aluminium Smelter Company of Nigeria, the National Iron Ore Mining Company, and the Delta Steel Company, now called Premium Steel and Mines, among others. Now, finally, to defense news, as the U.S. State Department has approved potential sales of munitions, precision bombs, and precision rockets to Nigeria for an estimated cost of $346 million. That's about 532 billion naira. This is reported by the Pentagon yesterday. The Defense Security Cooperation Agency said it already delivered the required certification notifying the U.S. Congress of the possible sale. Nigeria's insecurity remains one of its most pressing challenges, driven by a mix of armed banditry, Boko Haram, and Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP, insurgencies in the northeast, farmer-herder conflicts in the Middle Belt, separatist agitations in the southeast, militancy and oil theft in the Niger Delta, and rising urban crime. The federal government has responded through a multi-pronged approach. Militarily, it has launched and sustained operations such as Hadin Kai, Safe Haven, and Willstroke, while increasing the deployment of troops, air power, and special forces to flashpoints. Besides, it has invested in new military hardware, including fighter jets, drones, and armored vehicles, and has sought closer security cooperation with neighboring countries in the Lake Chad Basin. On the policy front, it has strengthened border security, passed laws targeting terrorism financing, and initiated programs like the National Counter-Terrorism Strategy. Now, of course, this will supplement some of the local production that we are already doing, and our troops just need all the support they can get at this point.
At first, I'd like to give kudos to our troops and security apparatchik in this country on the capturing of a top terrorist leader in the country. That's a good one. So when they do well, we'll say it, because when they also not do well, we'll say it. And arms, yes, a lot of the arms are the MAUs, these are precision kill strike bombs, from the Americans, and we've been able to buy it. And, at least it's even easier now to be able to get weapons, because I remember many years ago we used to be held and encumbered by the Leahy laws and things like that, and weapons were not sold to us. So definitely we're getting weapons out now to be able to fight this. But we need to also look at how these weapons are deployed. We need to ensure that they're also used effectively. And we need to also do the work of intelligence, which is very important. And that's one thing that, in some regard, we give kudos to the DSS as regards the work of intelligence they have done, but we need to double efforts as regards this. When we are hard on our security forces, it's not that we're not oblivious of some of the times that they do good work, but we want them to do better. And when they don't do well, we also state it. So, this is a welcome development, but over 500 billion. And at a time also, we also need to look and try to balance things. That we need to see how we can end this war quickly, because this war is equally becoming a drain pipe on Nigeria. Just imagine the 500 billion that we're trying to prosecute this war against terrorism with, if we expend that money providing schools and education. And that's why we need to look deeply. Methods at which we can end this. It is going to over 15 years we are fighting this now. The other day, the former military chief, Tukur Burtai, was saying it would take many other years, I think over 10 years more, with the way it's going. I just hope it ends at some point. But another story that is shocking me as regards how we're doing things, I'm going to tie it to President Tinubu wanting a 1 trillion economies. You cannot want a 1 trillion economy without having an effective budgeting. The DG of budget was saying that most of the capital projects, capex of the 2024 budget, we are running with 2025 revenue. And these are the things we need to be able to look, Currently, as we speak now, we're also running concurrently many budget cycles put together. Many different budget cycles put together. So we also need to look at our budgeting. And I'm sorry to burst President Tinubu's bubble. You see, enough of all of this 1 trillion economy. It's not going to be possible. I know it's a soundbite. Politicians want sound bites to talk about, but it's not going to be possible. And he knows that. So when we keep talking about looking forward to this 1 trillion economy, yes, we should develop the economy. We should try to drive down inflation and everything, but it's not going to be possible. Do the maths. If we grow at 7%, the best we can get to in 2030 is 365 billion or thereabout, $370 billion GDP. If we grow at 7%, the best we can get to, the time we will get to a 1 trillion economy, if we grow at 7%, is about 2044, about 19 years from now. That's if we grow at 7%. And it's going to take a lot for us to be able to grow at 7%. We have missed the growth trajectory. If we want to get to 1 trillion by 2030 that the president and people in finance keep muting, you are going to grow at 30.9%. No economy is growing at 30.9% as we speak. You can correct me if I'm wrong. 30.9% growth, do you know the inflation it's also going to bring? And it has to be consistent in a short space of time. What we can do is to tell the people the truth. How can we salvage this economy? This economy where you have a lot of bureaucratic bottlenecks, which is low productivity. You think I'm lying? Look at capital importation numbers. When the capital importation number came in, was it not just only Lagos and Abuja that got away with what is happening in other states? So because we are using hot money to be able to channel growth, does not mean that's the best way to grow. We need to be able to get people to believe in this economy and come into this economy. And how are we going to do that? By attracting more investment, clearing bureaucratic bottleneck, easing business environment. Let me say the word Rotus like to use, electricity. And Rotus will say, for you to be able to get electricity right, remove total subsidies. Rotus economies doesn't work that way. So we must look at these things. And the Ajaokuta they are talking about, Ajaokuta is a reflection of everything wrong with Nigeria. You want Ajaokuta to work in a country that's corruption reigns supreme. You want Ajaokuta to work in a country where people stop aeroplane and they are giving them ambassadorship for stopping plane stopping ambassador. What has bedeviled Ajaokuta since 1994 that they said it was, almost technically completed? It's corruption. A country that over 3 billion was spent on refinery, they told you that the refinery was technically complete. They even show you oil they produce from there to today is not running well. What happened to Nigeria refinery is what is happening to Ajaokuta. So let's stop deceiving ourselves. Let's call it speed a speed.
Okay, let me start with the presidency, the Tinubu administration, saying that FRS, Customs, NIMASA should review their deductions from their earnings, from the revenue that they earn. This is not a new matter. This is a matter that we dealt with when we were in government under the Jonathan administration. And what was observed? What was observed was that these revenue-generating agencies, they have a certain percentage that they take, including the NNPC, in terms of their running costs. And that percentage is, there was opaqueness about the percentage that they used to take. Opaqueness to the extent that many of these revenue-generating agencies were running private accounts. They were not known to government. Now, what the Minister of the National Economy then, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, tried to do was to harmonize all these accounts and to ensure sanity and transparency. But I don't know the extent to which the administration succeeded in that regard, but I know that even then, it was the Nigerian Customs Service who was making better returns to the economy. I'm therefore not surprised that the Tinubu administration is saying that to achieve the $1 trillion economy, that is the objective of the administration, revenue collection should be transparent and accountable, and all these revenue agencies, be they NNPC or NEMASA or NUPRC or customs, should make adequate returns, and they should be transparent in that regard. Two, that the percentage that they take will have to be reviewed. NNPC Limited, for example, takes 30% of management fee, 30% of frontier exploration under the PIA. So if you take all of that, what is left? Now, if you investigate further, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, Well, no, there are certain things I can't say. There were reports which showed that there are certain persons who were agents to the federal government of Nigeria who were just collecting rent. I don't want to cite the examples of those reports and whatever success may have been made by them. So I think that the Tinubu administration is doing the right thing by saying that there are leakages, what is called leaky buckets in the theory, and that they intend to plug it. And I find it instructive that Minister Wale Edun used the word that it's not just an economic issue. It is also a moral imperative. When he says moral imperative, he's pointing to corruption. So are they going to go a step further and, investigate, where the leakages are, the wastages are within the system? So that's the big thing about that. However, where it may be counterproductive is that many of these revenue-generating agencies, their standard argument is that the percentage of the revenue that they keep to themselves, which most of them keep in undeclared accounts, unknown to the federal government of Nigeria, where the counterproductive thing is that it could affect their operations, because they will say, oh, we're using this money to run transportation, to pay salaries, even when these agencies are covered under the budget of the federal government. So I think that the Tinubu administration, carrying torchlight, has again discovered where there is a loophole within the system. I don't know how far, to which extent they will succeed in plugging, what is called leaky bucket in the literature. That's that about that. As for Ajaokuta steel, the Ajaokuta steel project was wrong from the beginning. The Russians, who put that structure together, said that, look, for this place to function, you will need limestone, I think from Calabar. You will need iron ore from Itakpe. The iron ore, the grade of iron ore from Itakpe is not even up to the international standard. So they now say, okay, they have solid iron ore in Liberia, and I think, was it Guinea-Bissau? So do you know that the Nigerian Iron Ore Mining Corporation set up projects in Liberia and Guinea-Bissau? What happened to those projects? Nothing happened. They said for the Ajaokuta complex to function, you will need, what is it now? Clay. from Onibode, I think that's the name, Onibode in Ogun State, and so on and so forth. So it was supposed to be a complex, fed by, inputs from other places.
They even built rail line.
No, that's the next point I wanted to make. Those rail lines that are supposed to provide that link, because Ajaokuta is landlocked, it's in Kogi State. Nobody has done it since that time. So we've been going back and forth, and that's why I like the phrase used by the Tinubu government, that it's becoming a threat to sovereignty of Nigeria, because it's a waste pipe. So what next? That is what the Tinubu administration should think about. What are we going to do about this waste pipe? What is the next step? Should they turn the Ajaokuta complex into a free trade zone? Should they sell it as scrap? Because it looks like one administration after the other. Everybody comes, Ajaokuta, but we cannot do it. And even the technology has changed. The kind of technology that the Russians brought on the basis of it, if you use it today, it will be an environmental menace in the whole of that axis. So the technology is even outdated. So they keep talking about Ajaokuta. I think a more rational look should be adopted, and then perhaps maybe the original persons involved in the project can be invited again to advise the Nigerian government. Finally, the U.S. is selling us arms and ammunition. Well, that's very interesting to know. And the purpose of it is to fight insurgency, fight terrorism, and the Nigerian government is buying from the American industrial establishment. Again, it's the hypocrisy of the United States. When we were in government, President Obama was president of the U.S. then. We went to Israel. Israel wanted to help us. I was part of the delegation in the office of the Prime Minister, this same Netanyahu. Israel wanted to help Nigeria to fight this terrorism, to even, make ammunitions available to us, make jets available to us. The U.S. administration at the time opposed it. They blocked it. The National Security Advisor at that time went to Russia. There was an arrangement with Russia. America blocked it. I don't want to go into the details. It's not everything that is in my notes that I come on television to talk about. But the same America today, under Donald Trump, wants to sell jets and arms and ammunition to Nigeria. This is the United States, always here, always there. And but under Trump, it's a transactional administration, and Nigeria trying to buy, arms and ammunition from the United States, where it may be consideration in terms of diplomacy and all of that. But what I know, what I saw, I cannot say.
Oh, Dr. Abati, that's quite a teaser, because we want to know what you saw. We want to
Ladies
know.
and gentlemen, read it in the book when it comes out.
No, those things are never said.
Okay, fine, all right. No, that is appreciated in the interest of course, national security. Well, where do we begin today? I'll start with the issues pertaining to the economy. Now, talk of a $1 trillion economy by 2030 continues to gather momentum. However, I've quoted Simon Kuznets several times here, and I'll quote him again when he reminds us that the GDP of a country is not a qualitative metric, but a quantitative metric. What does that mean? That we can have a 1 trillion naira economy, but a majority of our population can still be poor, because it just measures economic activity. So if one man, like just for example, a Dangote, is able to achieve a $1 trillion revenue from his one business, that makes the country a $1 trillion economy. economy, but it does not necessarily mean that the citizens will feel the benefit of it. I use this just as a background to say that I think it's important that, yes, while we're looking at some public savings, especially in the instance of blocking certain wastages, looking at deductions and retentions that are skewed when it comes to revenue that should be coming to the state, and trying to save those, I think that's a very noble endeavor, and it's an important move to make. Now, they're saying that these public savings are all targeted towards public investment. Again, another noble move to make, because we need to have our own, these agencies exist for us to be able to raise our own money, to finance our own projects, so that we're cutting down on how much we're borrowing. However, going back to my initial point that all of this in the road to become a $1 trillion economy, we're doing public investment, we'll have roads, we'll have infrastructure and so forth, or at least we intend to. However, we're leaving out the welfare state, because public investment does not equal welfare state. It is a component of welfare state, but it does not necessarily mean that we are cushioning the lives of our citizens. So you can potentially be on the road to becoming a country like a South Africa, for example. Beautiful roads, bullet trains, bridges, you name it. Absolutely aesthetically pleasing to the eye, a great environment to do business. But guess what? People are protesting because they don't have access to water. People are protesting because electricity is too expensive. People are protesting because there are no jobs in the economy. So we have to be careful when we look at these macroeconomics and just remember that, yes, it is important to drive ourselves to aim high. However, how are we addressing the disparity that is being created as capitalism is running? I mean, I'm not anti-capitalism. It's important for us to be able to get businesses to work and create jobs and create an environment for people to thrive and flourish. But we also need to remember that society is made of different classes and different levels of people. And it should not be a crime or a condemnation to belong to a lower class or a lower level in society than anybody else. And that's where the state is supposed to step in to ensure that at least where it concerns critical issues of necessity, there is a level playing field. Now, I really love the fact that Rufai related to what happened with the aviation drama over the past week or so, because I think that this is also one thing we need to bring into context here. What did that drama show us? It showed us, number one, elite entitlement, impunity, corruption. Number two, it showed us rule of law. Are there consequences for our actions? Number three, it showed us that when all breaks down, citizens resort to anarchy and self-help. I bring this up to say, if we're trying to build a $1 trillion economy that impacts all people, if these issues, these structural fundamental issues are not addressed, then the microcosm that we saw in the aviation industry will continue on the bigger scale. Because ultimately, our stark reality will not change. The numbers may look different on the balance sheet, but the reality that we live, you and I, as we interact, we go out on the streets, will not change. So again, aiming for a $1 trillion economy, fantastic. Without carrying the entire nation along at all levels is a little bit problematic, in my opinion. So that's that. Now over to steel. Steel is what we call a foundational industry. Now, there's a political economist by the name of Paul Kennedy. He wrote a book called The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers. And in this book, he spoke about how a nation's steel output is a great indicator of its rise to greatness, indicator of military and economic power. So over the years, we know that steel has become extremely important to nations. It's become an issue of national security in most cases. Because even if you look at the WTO, steel is one of those components that even liberal economists agree should fall under a degree of protectionism. Now, when you look at what's happening with our own steel industry here and the huge potential that exists, the same microcosm that we just explained that we saw in the aviation sector over the past week applies. What are we seeing? Elite impunity, corruption, elite entitlement, then what are we seeing? Breakdown of rule of law. Are there consequences when we hear that there's been a looting or the deliverables are not met, things are not working well at Ajaokuta Steel? Are there consequences? Which investors are going to bring their money into an economy where they know that the rule of law is not implemented, that if the rules are broken, there are no consequences? So there's a cultural shift that needs to happen. Again, you look at issues concerning citizens resorting to self-help. All of these things that were highlighted in that airport drama that we saw over the past week are just a microcosm of issues that we see that if we are able to resolve them in various areas, then things can actually begin to work. So yes, targeting these huge industries to start working and so forth is important. However, if we're able to get the structural and cultural changes right, then a lot of the work will happen for itself. Private investors will be happy to come in their droves when they see that, okay, certain structures are in place. Now, steel has been a big conversation lately, especially with the United States. If you remember, there's a deal that was closed in June between Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. Very controversial because U.S. Steel, of course, is regarded as a strategically important company to the United States. So Joe Biden had previously rejected that deal. Donald Trump has now gone ahead to approve it. But what has shifted? What has shifted is that they needed the investment. So they've now gone for a model where Japanese Nippon Steel brought in $14 billion, I believe, and they control the business of it. However, the U.S. state still controls all the major decisions that happen there. This type of model, I think, is possibly something that we can look at because the private sector, we can't take away the fact that private sector is the expert at business. That's what private sector is about. Government involvement has shown us time and time again that because, again, of the structural and cultural issues that we face leads to inefficiencies because refurbishment is now becoming a common thing that we're hearing in this sector, that sector, refurbishment. The next government will also come in and start telling us about refurbishment and so forth. So let's look for permanent solutions so we stop revisiting these same issues ad infinitum.